Welcome to The Print Live. We are here to talk about our exclusive story today about India stopping the printing of the 2000 rupee notes. Please do send us your questions and we'll be happy to answer them. So India has stopped printing of the 2000 rupee notes. These notes were initially introduced in November 2016 after India invalidated the rupees 500 and rupees 1000 notes as part of its demonetization exercise. The Narendra Modi government introduced demonetization as part of its efforts to curb tax evasion, check money laundering, and basically weed out fake notes. At that time, it led to massive currency shortages because the government was not able to replace the notes at the same pace at which they were withdrawn. Nearly 85% of India's currency under circulation was withdrawn in a shock move. Because of this, many people had to face a lot of problems in terms of they had no access to cash, led to huge lines in ATMs and massive stress across, led to huge job losses as many industries had to be shut down because a lot of small industries made payments or handled everything in cash. At that time, the government introduced 2000 rupee notes and new 500 rupee notes. Initially, a lot of 2000 rupee notes were introduced into the market to curb that very big cash shortage at that time. Later, the government also started printing the new 500 rupee notes. But what has now happened is over the last 2 years, the government has realized that 2000 rupee notes is now being used to hoard cash, and it's also being used by tax evaders and money launderers, because of which they have now decided to stop printing these notes and instead rely on the 500 rupee notes. So over the last 2 years, the printing of the 2000 rupee notes has come down gradually, whereas the 500 rupee notes printing has picked up pace. So if you look at RBI's annual report, where they give the data till March 2018, the share of the 500 rupee notes in the total value of currency has almost doubled to 42% as of March 18, as against around 22% in March 17. In contrast, the share of the 2000 currency notes, 2000 currency in the total value of the value of the 2000 currency in the total circulation has actually come down from 50% to 37%. So this shows that there has been a gradual squeeze of the 2000 rupee circulation. So does this mean that the government will, it's again another demonetization on its way? Not really, because what the government plans is to gradually phase it out and not suddenly, say that, oh, these notes are no longer invalid, are no longer valid. The government says that this is mainly because what happened was last year in April, there was a massive cash shortage, and the government wondered that why suddenly there's so much cash shortage. They then realized after a lot of income tax raids and that there was a lot of hoarding that was happening of the 2000 own currency, especially because at that time the Karnataka elections were around the corner, and people were also fearing that because of the massive bank fraud that happened at Punjab National Bank, people were also fearing that, is their money safe? And a lot of people decided to use the 2000 rupee currency to stock that cash at home. So this was one of the major reasons, which was kind of a wake-up call for the government, and the government then decided to gradually reduce the circulation of these notes. So the first question that we have is from Jasminder Bajwa. He says that this move was inevitable, and he is asking whether the 2000 rupee note be released soon. So as of now, there was a lot of talk that the 1000 rupee note will be released at the time of demonetization, but there doesn't seem to be any fresh initiative on that account from the government. So most probably the government will rely on the 500 rupee notes rather than go and print new 1000 rupee notes. Remember, the whole reason for demonetization that the government tried to pitch in was that lower denominations will help avoid or help in preventing people from using high denomination currencies for money laundering or tax evasion. So the more higher the denomination, the easier it is for such people. So it's likely to send a very wrong signal to people that if in case they bring in a 1000 rupee note. So most likely they're likely to persist with printing 500 rupee notes and not really the higher denominations. The next question is from is the current new notes of rupees 10, 20, 50, 500 have more security features as compared to older notes. Yes, all of the new notes have a lot of additional security features in terms of watermarks and those security threads that are there. You can go to the RBI website. They have a very detailed presentation of what are the security features of each note. And in fact, the enhanced security features of all the new notes. So they are trying to prevent the prevent these notes being faked very easily. Then Prashant Garwal is asking on when will be the specific time when the 2000 rupee notes will stop getting printed. I understand that the 2000 rupee notes are already not being printed. Every year the government and the RBI at the beginning of the year sit together to figure out what should be the ideal currency mix in terms of how many 100 rupee notes should be there in circulation, what should be the 200 rupee note, 500 rupee note, 2000 rupee note. So they arrive at this ideal mix of the currency in circulation. We have nearly 18 trillion. The currency in circulation right now is more than 18 trillion, of which say the 2000 rupee notes is only around 6.7 trillion. The 500 rupee notes is around 7.5 or 7.7 trillion, and the remaining other currencies make the rest of the basket. So it depends on what is the ideal mix that the government and the RBI wants. As far as we know, 2000 rupee note is no longer the preferred currency for both the government and the RBI. And we are also asked by Rohit Ingale, and what would be the reason for suddenly stopping the printing of the 2000 rupee note? So what happened was in April last year, there was a massive cash shortage, across many parts of the country, especially eastern parts of Bihar. You had problems, I think, in Andhra, and there was this Andhra, Karnataka, there was a massive cash shortage, despite the fact that the currency in circulation was more than adequate. Because of this, there were a lot of, the government is also perplexed on what was the reason for this. So then they asked the Income Tax Department to actually act on any tip-offs that the tax department got in terms of who's really what is happening to all the current cash in circulation. That's the time that they found that a lot of these notes were being hoarded. Specifically, you were finding it from politicians, from builders who were like stocking this cash at home. That was the time when the government really woke up to the fact that 2000 is a much more easier currency to hoard and use for tax evasion and money laundering. So those seems to be the specific reasons for which the 2000 rupee notes, they have decided to gradually phase them out. Gopala Raval asks, and do you agree that Indian policymakers should leave the obsession with banning and introduction of currency notes? Since 70% of the population lives in rural areas, it is not possible to use digital money very effectively in near future without proper infrastructure, education, and cost of using digital money. I agree with the fact that not everyone uses digital currency, and even you talk about rural areas, but even in urban areas, I think a lot of our parents or people of the older generation are still handicapped about using digital currency. Yes, so yes, that is not the only way. And yes, I agree that banning and introduction of currency notes, at least the banning part of it, is a big problem for at least people in the rural areas where, say, a bank branch or an ATM is kilometers away, and suddenly, one day they get up and they realize that, the notes that they are holding in their hands are no longer any value, and they have to trek kilometers and kilometers to go to a branch or an ATM. So yes, in India, where we are still struggling to ensure that every household has a bank account, or every you have a bank branch in every kilometer or every 5 kilometers, yes, ideally we should not be talking about banning currencies and introducing new notes. Tyler Durden asks, on how will this affect people? So it should not ideally affect the common man, because the government has stepped up production of the printing of the 500 rupee note, and at any time the currency in circulation will be adequate to meet the demands of the currency. So as of March 2018, the currency under circulation was almost 18 trillion. That is more than adequate. It was around 16 trillion at the time demonetisation happened. So though we are much lower than the rate of growth, that ideally we should have been around 21 trillion currency in circulation if one looks at past growth trends, but we're still at 18 trillion, which the RBI and the government think is more than sufficient. Then Mohammed Labib asks, and how will this measure affect the electoral politics, especially the Lok Sabha elections in 2019? I think the government can very clearly say that, see, we are very serious about checking tax evasion and curbing money laundering, and see how effectively we have done it. So they could use this as another of their steps that they have taken. The Modi government, when it's come to power, has actually announced a lot of steps, including the enactment of that very stringent Foreign Black Money Act, the enactment of that Benami Properties Act. They also brought in this voluntary disclosure scheme for all of those black money, for people to come ahead and declare black money. Demonetisation was one major step, and so was the introduction of the goods and services tax, which kind of led to a big expansion of the taxpayer base and forced more people to come under the tax net. So the government has a lot of things that they can talk about as their achievements in curbing or in their achievements in bringing to account tax evaders. The opposition, on the other hand, could always use this as saying that, you know, the government unnecessarily forced people through the pains of demonetisation, because, you know, they phased out a 1,000 rupee note and bought in a 2,000 rupee note instead. Even bankers like Uday Kotak have criticized the move of phasing out a 500 and 1,000 rupee note and bringing a 2,000 rupee note instead, saying that it kind of ensured that demonetisation was not as effective as it should have been. So I think it provides ammunition to both sides, and both sides will, it depends on how effectively both sides use this in the elections. What was the real, Nitin Parikh asks, so what was the real objective of demonetisation? Because its sole purpose of getting fake currency is thrashed by the RBI statement of recovering 99.3% notes and also the loss on GDP. So yes, you have a point that the RBI recovered almost 99.3% of the currency which was under circulation. But the government counters that because people were forced to make these deposits into banks, they now have a more effective transaction trail that is there. So say, you know, I had this cash at home which was unaccounted for, and now I have like deposited in a bank under my name. The tax department can ask me questions on why or what was the source of my money. The government has sent the tax department using this entire demonetisation data, so basically deposits between November 9th to December 31st. They have mined this data and they have looked at looked at past tax filing trends and past deposit trends to figure out that, you know, what who all has deposited unaccounted money. They have sent out a lot of notices. They have tried to be non-intrusive about it. So they've sent a lot of notices to taxpayers, asking them that, you know, please or to non-taxpayers also, to asking them to explain how these deposits have come into their bank accounts. So there has been a very constant effort on part of the government to ensure that it's not really as in the whole, though the deposits have come back, there are questions being asked on the source of these deposits. Again, I agree that you know, they may not be, many may go scot-free, because people have been very ingenuous in the way that they have managed to evade the government questions and the tax department questions. You may have, they may have made deposits through employees who don't get paid as much, or they may have made deposits through their relatives, non-earning relatives. So there have been a lot of ways where people have tried to circumvent, and it may not have been that successful as an exercise as the government initially envisaged. In terms of fake notes, again, there are reports that some of the denominations have been successfully faked, but again, it depends from which version you're hearing. And yes, it has impacted GDP. There has been a quarterly dip in the GDP growth numbers, at least in the quarter immediately following demonetization. So yes, there has been an impact. The jobs data is not, we don't really have very good jobs data, but on ground experience or on ground reporting tells us that a lot of these cash intensive, labor intensive sectors have suffered. Say for the textile sector in Tirupur had a major problem during this time, and so did a lot of small industries in UP and Delhi, where the major cash payments to employees, to those small workers were in cash. Construction sector was another big sector that got hit during this demonetization. So yes, there has been a loss to GDP, there has been a loss in terms of especially to the MSME sector, where all of these, it's not a very formal sector, it's mainly an informal sector. So yes, these are the sectors that have got impacted. People have lost jobs. So always the benefits and the negatives of demonetization can always be debated on. Can the people of Republic India sue government and RBI for misleading the achievements of demonetization? I'm not really sure how does this work? So Abhishek Kumar asked, so was there anything worthwhile about demonetization, or is it an outright scam? So okay, so we have another question. How can the government claim demonetization is effective when Election Commission has said record amounts of money were seized during the recently held state elections? So the 2000 rupee notes were used again during these elections, as the seizures by the tax department shows. So hence one of the reasons why the government is thinking of stopping the printing of the 2000 rupee notes. And with that, we end this live session.